Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, how much longer do we continue the experiment? Did anybody get better? And how much is too much for Allgeier? It's all next. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hittin Hard is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to all of your podcasts. Get the latest episodes of Hittin Hard as soon as they become available. And then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So this is not just now become a small sample size. This is now 3 years running of the Marcell Ozuna experiment, I guess is what we will call it. So look at his numbers over the last 3 years. Well, let's focus first on what he's not done this year. 2 for 27. He does have a couple of homers, 2 RBI. So again, we'll talk about the numbers overall here for the last 3 years in a second. But again, a one-trick pony who can hit the ball out of the ballpark, but doesn't do anything else. He's now hitting .074 with a .219 on-base percentage and a .296 slugging. Now, for the last 3 seasons, after that glorious pandemic year, right, he led the league in plate appearances. He led the league in home runs. He led the league in RBI. He won a Silver Slugger. He finished 6th in the MVP. Now, I go back to that season in the pandemic simply because Marcell Ozuna specifically said that during the time that they were off for the pandemic, remember, they started like in July or something like that, that he took that time to get himself in shape and get himself ready to play. Well, okay, I'm glad that he took that extra time, but are we not as dedicated? Here's his last 3 years. And again, injury has played into it, off the field issues have played into it, and everything else. He's played 180 games the last 3 seasons with 685 at-bats. He's got 32 homers and 84 RBI, hitting .216 with a .276 on base, a .669 OPS. 32 homers in 84 RBI. Now, that might be acceptable even for just one season, but when you factor that over 3 years and 180 games, well, that doesn't come out to be a very productive season, even for one season. But over a 3-year span. And look, here's the thing about Ozuna, okay? They need him right now. They've got a bunch of guys hurt, whether it's Michael Harris, Travis d'Arnaud. You've got regular players out of your lineup. And obviously, forget all the pitching problems and different things like that, but you've got regular guys out of your lineup now. And they need a Marcell Ozuna to do something, right? Just even contribute a little bit. But how much longer is this experiment going to go on? This is getting to a point of, and look, we've talked about this on the show in the past. I didn't like the Ozuna contract when they gave it to him. I understand you probably felt like he got backed in the corner, but I would have let him walk after that pandemic year and let him go peddle his wares somewhere else. This may be the one mistake that Alex Anthopoulos has made as far as offering contracts and things like that. He's a one-trick pony. Look, when he won it out of Florida, he had his monster year, 37 homers, 120 RBI, hit .312, okay? And then he also had his monster year in the 60-game pandemic season. 18 homers, 56 RBI, led the league in homers, led the league in RBI and all that, and he capitalized into a good contract off of it. But he's profiled way more as the player in St. Louis. He's a one-trick pony that doesn't do many other things well. He doesn't steal bases. He doesn't hit for average. He doesn't get on base. He doesn't drive in runs unless he homers. Again, he had a couple of years where he was with St. Louis where 29 homers and only 89 RBI, 23 homers and only 88 RBI. And again, even last year, 23 homers and 56 RBI. So he doesn't do a lot of things well. And we're not talking about a small sample size at this point. We're not talking about, well, he's just off to a slow start. This is 180 games and 747 plate appearances. And again, I know the off the field issues and stuff like that, you miss some time with all that, but he's hurt. He's not healthy. He doesn't produce. And look, here's the situation. They've got $37 million of money for Ozuna that is still owed to him, right? Between this year and next year, he's got $37 million guaranteed dollars, because guess what? In MLB, all the contracts are guaranteed. So he's got $37 million. But there comes a point of diminishing return. Do the Braves need him? Yes, they need him to step up with all of the injuries that are occurring right now. They need some help. They need to maintain that depth of their lineup. Yes, they're winning games in spite of what Marcell Ozuna is doing. But now as the injuries start to pile up here a little bit with Harris and d'Arnaud and, again, they need his production. They need him to do something for this offense. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Is he going to hit 074? No. But again, is he more than a 250 hitter? Probably not. He's probably not even that. And yeah, when he makes contact, the ball can travel a long way, right? Both of his hits are home runs this year, right? If he gets a hold of one, he could, it'll fly out of the park. But when you have a guy that doesn't do anything else, it's not like if he stole a bunch of bases or he played really good defense, right? You could live with Adam Duvall being a one-trick pony, being a 209 hitter, and having 25 homers because he was a really good defensive player, right? You could live with some of those things if there's some other intangible that goes along with Marcell Ozuna. But when you can't field, hit for average, get on base, steal bases, play defense, and the only thing you can do is homer. And yeah, again, that's a good skill to have. But when you only drive in, the only 2 runs that you've driven in is because you've homered. You can't produce runs. It's not a good thing. And this is 3 years running now since that pandemic season. It's been one thing after another. And at some point, do the Braves have to just say, okay, we've got to cut our losses. We're better off bringing up one of our young guys than keeping a roster spot open because we just don't want to DFA Marcell Ozuna. And I get it. I understand the money and different things like that. But when you're making $100 gazillion from the battery and every quarter seems to be bigger than the last, right? The Braves are in this window of they're popular, they're successful, they're winning, they won a championship. You're getting all of the momentum from all of that stuff. The Braves have won 5 divisions in a row. Like, all of the news out of Braves country is really good, and it's leading to big business, right? It's leading to all kinds of record revenues and things from the battery and all this money. They're flush with cash. So again, this is one of those things that sometimes at some point there's a law of diminishing returns on all of this. And Marcell Ozuna is getting to the point of the law of diminishing returns. Not having him be on the club may be better than him playing, whether in the field or DHing or doing something else. Again, this is 3 years running of a lack of production for Marcell Ozuna. Maybe at some point it's time to cut bait. Maybe at some point it's time to end the experiment. All right, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel. Listen, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And if you're a new customer to FanDuel, you can head to FanDuel.com and claim your no sweat first bet, where you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. You can bet on everything from winners to money lines to point scores to everything in between. Plus, FanDuel allows you to combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So head to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON, and head there and claim your no sweat first bet, where you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. So the Hawks now play Tuesday night, right? We got tomorrow night, Hawks and Miami Heat, who, by the way, last year in the regular season, this year in the regular season, and the playoffs last year. You know what the Hawks are against the Miami Heat? They're 3-10 in their last 13 games between these 2 years. By the way, they've lost 7 in a row in Miami, okay? So here's what I'm looking at with the Atlanta Hawks, okay? Probably the Hawks go to Miami, they lose. They'll turn around on Friday night. They'll play the winner of Toronto and Chicago. I'll call Toronto because Toronto's at home. I'll say the Raptors, okay? And they'll beat the Raptors, and then they'll get the Milwaukee Bucks, and that won't end very well, okay? Here's the question. Did anybody get better for the Atlanta Hawks? Did anybody play better for the Atlanta Hawks? Was Trae Young, because again, before I get into players, here's the thing we always hear. Well, the Hawks are really young. The Hawks are a really young team and all this and the other. And, they're okay. So if you have a bunch of young guys that start for you, shouldn't guys get better? Shouldn't there be some noticeable improvement year over year? If we're gonna live by the mantra of, oh, well, we're a young team and this and the other, okay, then shouldn't we see player development? Or if we're not seeing player development, we don't have the right players. And that's really what's kind of happening right now. Was Trae Young better this year over last? I mean, his stats are about the same, but he didn't shoot the ball very well. There were nights when he disappeared offensively. Was John Collins better? No, he never fit in the flow of the offense, and hence he's got his second lowest points per game total since his rookie year. Was Clint Capella better? No, he's about the same kind of guy. He's, 12 points, 10 boards. I mean, can't argue with that. I mean, he gives you very consistent numbers, but again, he's not taking some big step forward. Was DeAndre Hunter better? Again, DeAndre Hunter scored the most points per game in his career by 0.4 points. He had 15.4 points per game this year. His high was 15. Okay, so can we hang our hat on the fact that 0.4 points per game is better, even though his defensive rating is the second lowest among Hawks regulars at 119? Or the fact that his three-point shot is not as good as what it's been in the past, his field goal percentage isn't as good as what it's been in the past? Did anybody look at DeAndre Hunter and say, that guy took a real step forward? Who took a step forward? Nobody on this team. And I'm not blaming all of this on Nate McMillan. I'm not blaming this on Quinn Snyder. I'm not blaming this on Joe Prunty. But again, this is 2 years running of a Midland to below average franchise where, we didn't know maybe what things were going to be last year, but we definitely had expectations for this year going into the season. Okay, we gave up some draft capital to go get DeJounte Murray. He's an all-star, second-team all-defense. Okay, we got a dynamic running mate for Trae Young, and we're going to play him a little bit more off-ball, and we're going to do this and do that and all that kind of stuff. And listen, John Collins should benefit because you've got Trae and DeJounte Murray to facilitate, and, all is going to be good. And if Clint Capella can just clean up the boards and this and the other, and, just all kind of went to pot. 41-41. For the year. We had that little 3-game winning streak. We're trying to get some momentum. Then we take on the 76ers on Friday night, and they have a G League team, right? We talked about this on Friday. They put out their G League lineup that they literally had 2 guys that were like in Delaware last week. Literally, like they had 2 players that started for them that were in Delaware winning the G League title. And we still couldn't beat them. And we played our regulars. We played Trey and all that kind of stuff. Then Trey sits out yesterday to rest up and things like that. You know why he's going to rest up? Because Miami's going to beat the ever-living daylights out of them. That's how Miami beats this team. They beat the ever-living daylights out. They way out physical us. But we'll preview the game kind of tomorrow and everything like that. But I asked, did anybody get better for the Atlanta Hawks? We can't sit here and talk about how we're a young team and all this kind of stuff, and then we don't watch anybody get better. We don't watch Collins, Hunter, Young, anybody get better. You know, toward the end of the year, A.J. Griffin hits the rookie wall. You know, did Jalen Johnson get better? Maybe. Maybe he got a little bit better. Of course, I mean, he didn't play, but, half the season. So, if you're playing more minutes, you should be able to do some more things on the court. But by and large, did any of the guys that we really are going to count on, Bogey, Capella, Young, Murray, Collins, Hunter, did any of those guys get better that are the real important pieces? I'm glad if Jalen Johnson got better. With all due respect, he's not the reason that we're going to get, this franchise is going to turn the corner. Jalen Johnson's never going to be an all-star. If we're going to turn the corner with this franchise, it's going to be on the backs of Collins, Capella, Hunter, Young, Murray, Bogey, those kinds of guys. This is the reality of where we're at, okay? If you ask me, if I pick 3 guys, Collins, Hunter, Capella, okay? I don't think that all 3 of those guys will start the season for the Hawks next year. I don't think all 3 of those guys will start the season next year. I think 1 or 2 of those guys will not be on the roster because of money, because of chemistry, just because this franchise is going nowhere. I'd rather let Sadiq Bey or Jalen Johnson have more of an opportunity and see what they can do than the same old thing of guys don't get better with all of this. This was a maddening season to watch, very frustrating, and we'll see what happens come, tomorrow night, but most likely they'll lose tomorrow and then get the chance to play on Friday for a chance to take on the Milwaukee Bucks, and we all know how that's going to end. All right, after you make Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen, make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day available Odyssey, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get all of your podcasts from. So how much of a load will be too much for Tyler Allgeier? So last year, Tyler Allgeier got 210 carries in 7 starts, played all 16 games. He got 210 carries in 7 starts, 1,035 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he also caught 16 receptions out of the backfield last year. Now, Allgeier was a pretty good workhorse back when he played at BYU. His final season, his redshirt sophomore season, he had 276 carries for 1,601 yards. The year before, when he became really a full-time starter in their offense, he had 150 carries for 1,150 yards. And if you look at where Allgeier finished in the NFL, he was 16th in the NFL in carries last year. Derrick Henry had the most with 349. Allgeier finished 16th with 210. How much is a workload for Tyler Allgeier? Can he be 250, 260? Let me give you some of the running backs that are in that 250 to, let's say, 270 kind of range, okay? Miles Sanders for Philadelphia, he had 259 carries. McCaffrey this past year, by the way, had 244 carries. Jamal Williams out of Detroit, he had 262 carries. Dalvin Cook who's not the biggest guy, but he runs very physical. He had 264 carries. And then Najee Harris, who I really like, but again, he had 272 carries. So can Allgeier be a guy that gets you 260 to 270 carries? I think so. I mean, I think that just by attrition of the fact of Allgeier is probably most likely going to be a 16-game starter for this team, and he will be RB1 when all is said and done. You figure that he is going to get more carries. And the fact that averaging almost 4.9 yards per carry. I mean, he was almost 5 yards a carry last year. That's a great number. We always talk about you need to be at least 4 yards a carry to be productive in the NFL, right? Well, he was almost 5 yards a carry, just a whisker below at 4.9. But you would figure just the attrition of starting every game, being more involved in the offense, not being a rookie anymore, he will get some more carries. And if he can get to 260, 270 carries, extrapolate that to almost 5 yards a carry, he can be that role that Michael Turner played. Not the 400 carries and 1,800 yards and 12 touchdowns and things like that. Not the same kind of player that Michael Turner was, but establishing that consistent running game where there's that one guy that you can rely on weekly to take some of the load off your passing attack, right? That when in case of emergency, break glass and we can have Allgeier do it. Because look, I do think that Cordarrelle Patterson is sort of on the downslope of his career. I do think that you're not going to see as many carries. In fact, I wouldn't even mind if Cordarrelle Patterson's carries go down, but you see an uptick in his receptions, if you see him be more involved in the passing game. Because I think if you get Patterson out in some space, that he can do some damage. And if you can throw the football to him and let him go run and do his thing, I think that's his best idea. I don't think that running him between the tackles with as violent as he runs is a recipe for long-term success. But Allgeier is kind of that bowling ball that can get you up yards through the middle of the offensive line, and especially if you run around that right-hand side with Lindstrom and McGarry over there. So I do expect Tyler Allgeier to be in that 260, 270 range. I don't think he's going to be a 300-yard carry or 300 carry type of running back. I don't think that that's where they want him to live. I think that with a three-headed monster where you do give some carries to Cordarrelle Patterson, and whether you bring back a Caleb Huntley or you draft a running back, and again, I'm not talking about Bijan Robinson, but talking about drafting a running back through some of your middle rounds and things like that, that all of those guys will have a hand in this running game. But I do think that if we're looking at 250, 260 carries for Tyler Allgeier, okay, that's a nice workload, and you can build off of that. And if he can give you almost 5 yards a carry, you figure 250 at 5 yards a carry, okay, now we're talking 1,300 yards of production out of a running back. That's where I think that this team will be so successful. If you told me that Tyler Allgeier was 250 carries, 1,300, let's say 12 or 1,300 yards, and maybe 8 touchdowns, I think our offense would be in pretty good shape. Because I do think that we are going to get ourselves back a little bit more in the balanced area. Remember, Falcons were the only team in the NFL that called more run plays than pass plays, right? And again, we're not going to be San Diego or Cincinnati where we're going to have 75, 70% pass to only 20, 30, 25, 30% run. We're going to be a more balanced offense. And you would expect that Desmond Ridder in year 2, they're going to give him an opportunity, whether it's London and Pitts and all these weapons that are kind of forming around him, all these pieces that, look, again, even the Michael Pruitts and people like that. And obviously, look, if Patterson is a guy that can, be a guy that catches a lot of balls out of the backfield, and Jonnu Smith, and, again, our passing attack should start to get on the way upward, but we're still not going to be 75, past a 25% run, we're probably maybe it becomes 55-45. Maybe we'll get 55% past a 45% run. And in that case, if Tyler Allgeier can be 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, then that gives you your balance that you're looking for. Because I don't expect our offensive line to take a step back. I don't expect our offensive line to regress at all. Even if we have to sort of plug and play with our interior offensive line, with our left guard position, I do think that they are going to, in the draft at some point, address that. But that you can run on the right-hand side of that line. You can run behind Lindstrom and McGarry. That those two guys can bulldoze people over, and you can run through everybody. So if nothing else, look, run it to the right-hand side of that offensive line. But I do think Allgeier, you're looking at 250, 260, maybe in the 265 kind of range for his carries this upcoming season. And again, 250, 260, 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns. That would be a really successful season, playing that Michael Turner role without the 400 carries and 1,800 yards, but still keeping a balance on this offense. All right, well, thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. Make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available Odyssey, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get all of your podcasts from. We ask you to subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We thank you so much for 6,000 plus subscribers, over 6,100 now subscribers to our YouTube page. You can catch the latest episodes of Hittin' Hard as soon as they become available. And then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Back with you tomorrow. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.